right? It was always just a short-term trade back to Bitcoin after you get some profits from it. So I do think from this point, for the next at least 2 to 3 weeks, you should see Bitcoin dominance continue to.
In every crypto cycle, there comes a moment when emotion collides with history, when investors forget how markets behave and start believing this time is different. But as Benjamin Cowen reminds us, it rarely ever is. In this deep analysis, Cowen breaks down the real reason traders are offside on altcoins in 2025, why Bitcoin dominance keeps climbing, and why the end of this year could determine whether the next great crypto bull market continues, or if we're already staring at the early signs of a bear market.
The reason why people are so offside with altcoins is because they expected it to be like 2021, when we had rates at zero and money printing galore. And this is more like the 2017 cycle, like structurally and also in the way that altcoins have been behaving with respect to Bitcoin. And so one of the things that I've mentioned a few times is how similar this is to the 2017 cycle, where you have this rally by alt Bitcoin pairs that starts in the summer, and then it kind of like tops out in August, September, and then it comes crashing back down by early November. And then it got another rally, and then another crash in early December. So the reasoning for kind of talking about the devaluation of alt Bitcoin pairs was just saying, hey guys, like what if this plays out like it's always played out in other cycles besides the 2021 cycle, where you continue to see altcoins drop against Bitcoin even as late as early November of the post-halving year. A lot of people, when they think of alt season, they think of what happened like last cycle, where alts outperformed Bitcoin for a really long time. But in reality, a lot of times in cycles before last cycle, the alt season that people want, it really only lasts for like a month or two, right? It's not a year-long process. It's a very short process. Everyone FOMOs into altcoins. Bitcoin dominance capitulates, it drops, and then the bear market begins, right? And during the bear market, Bitcoin dominance kind of just slowly works its way back up. Again, I think the reason this cycle people have been offsides is because they expected to play out like last cycle. And right now, we're at a very precarious position where I'm of the opinion that the only way you can even get an alt season at this point is if Bitcoin goes to all-time highs, right? And as we've seen throughout this entire cycle, the process of Bitcoin going to all-time highs is accompanied by Bitcoin dominance also going to new cycle highs, right? And you can see that this purple line right here, let me put Bitcoin on this chart, but anytime this cycle that Bitcoin has rallied to a new cycle high, you'll notice that during that time, Bitcoin dominance is going up. And then when the new cycle high is breached, that's when Bitcoin dominance gets a correction, right? And that also happened over here as well. Like as Bitcoin rallied to a new cycle high, Bitcoin dominance went up, and then again in 2025, right? So you've seen that process play out many, many times. So from this point, in order to get an alt season by the end of the year, you have to have a rally by Bitcoin to all-time highs. And if you don't get that, if Bitcoin just struggles for the rest of the year, what's going to happen is you won't have an alt season, but Bitcoin dominance will go up regardless. As we saw on last Friday, we saw, altcoins capitulate. I think we're kind of in this defensive rotation right now, and that's likely going to persist for at least 2 to 3 more weeks, minimum, would be my guess. I can think of a scenario why altcoins would go up on their USD pairs, right? It would require Bitcoin to go up. But in that case, Bitcoin is still going up more, So I think that's kind of the rationale that I've had for a lot of this cycle of like, why even bother with all these altcoins unless you're going to take a short-term trade, right? Like if you're going to take a short-term trade and trade the breakout and then get out of the altcoin before the rotation back to Bitcoin begins, you can do that. But there's not really been a time in this cycle where an individual altcoin, except for maybe like 2 or 3, there's not really been a great time where an individual altcoin was a great long-term investment, right? It was always just a short-term trade back to Bitcoin after you get some profits from it. So I do think from this point, for the next at least 2 to 3 weeks, you should see Bitcoin dominance continue to climb. And the thing about it is it doesn't really matter what way Bitcoin goes, right? Every single outcome would likely yield alts fading for a little bit on at least their Bitcoin pairs.
But this time, liquidity is constrained, rates are elevated, and institutional attention is focused squarely on Bitcoin ETFs, not altcoin gambling. The result? A relentless gravitational pullback to Bitcoin, squeezing alt BTC pairs lower even when dollar prices of altcoins appear stable.
The hard part for me right now with it is that, like, so far everything keeps like kind of playing out. Like, you had the way the cycle ends for Bitcoin every single time, the way it's always ended, is you have a high in August or early September, and then a low in September or early October. So let's just go through each cycle, right? So in 2013, you had a high in August, and then a low the week of September 30th, so going into early October. And then you had the rally into the market cycle top. That was the first cycle. The second cycle, same thing. A high in August, a low in September, a rally into the top. And the last cycle, same thing, right? A high in early September, a low in, like late September, early October, and then a rally into the market cycle top. This time, we had a high in August, a low in September, and then arguably a rally into the market cycle top. The only thing is that hasn't happened just yet. So either this time is different and we don't get the rally into the market cycle top, or it's still ahead of us. So I think what I'm thinking about it right now is that, like, when we think about cycle theory, none of the peak indicators have gone off, right? Like, no indicator that anyone has created since 2019 has actually signaled that the top is in, right? So that rally is either ahead of us or it's not going to happen at all. If it's not going to happen at all, that'll likely be obvious to me by the end of the year. If Bitcoin is still not trading to new all-time highs by mid-December, it would be hard for me to, like, stay bullish on it past that point. Like, I would have to start assuming that next year would be a bear market, because with markets, I tend to think that tops are processes and that bottoms are events, right? Like, bottoms happen really quickly, tops happen over a really long period of time. And the uncomfortable truth right now that I'm grappling with, and I still have my Bitcoin position, I'm still holding on in the hopes that we can get another rally, but the one crazy thing is that, like, it's only $2,000 higher than it was on Inauguration Day. Like, on Inauguration Day, Bitcoin had 109K, and right now it's at 111K. I'm like, what the hell's been going on, for the last 9 months to allow for this? So for me, I want to give it one final chance to get a rally, right, into December, potentially, or, through this month, and potentially as late as December. Like, I want to give it that chance, to maybe connect the dots on this or something. But I also, if it hasn't done it by the end of the year, I have a feeling like a lot of people are going to start pivoting, right? Because they're looking at it the same way I am. They're like, well, it hasn't really moved in a while. If it moves a lot by the end of the year and it's at 200K, yeah, I feel like you have to go into 2026 assuming it's a bear market, right? If it doesn't move for the rest of the year, then I would wonder, why not? Like, what's going on? Like, what's keeping Bitcoin from doing what it's always done? The only way that I might be inclined to think that it could go on longer is if you just kind of have another steady incline. Everyone gets wrecked at some point, and the market humbles literally everyone. There's not a single person that doesn't get humbled at some point. I think the way I would navigate it, though, is at the very least, I think you have to... The thing I always do in midterm years, like, regardless, like, even if I think it's going to be a bear market, I still keep some Bitcoin, and I usually get out of all altcoin positions, right? Because Bitcoin, if it is a bear market next year, then Bitcoin should recover to new all-time highs first in the following cycle, right? And we saw that this cycle as well. Like, Bitcoin hit all-time highs way before Ethereum did, and most other altcoins. So I think you have to at least protect your downside by getting out of altcoins. Because if there is a bear market next year, it probably won't be as bad as the last bear market, right? Because the last bear market was a little bit more bearable than the one before that. If you look at it, every bear market gets a little bit easier to manage. The first one was like 94% down. The next one was 87. The next one was 84. The next one was 77. So I'm saying if there is a bear market next year, from the high in Q4 to the low in, say, late 2026, I would say probably about a 70% drawdown. But that doesn't mean it has to be a 70% drawdown from 126. Like, it could be, but it also could be a 70% drawdown from a higher price if we can get one final push before the end of the year. So again, like a lot of these numbers don't always make sense. Imagine in 2017, imagine it's October 2017, right? It's the exact same week, right? The week of October 16th or whatever. Bitcoin was sitting at $5,000. Now imagine I came on your channel and said Bitcoin's going to drop 80% next year. That would have sounded crazy, especially because Bitcoin then rallied 300%. It still dropped 80%, but it only dropped 40% from where the price was in October, right? So again, I think this is one of those things where a lot of people disagree, but maybe by December, more people will be on the same page if the bullish view actually plays out.
One Bitcoin fails to break out, dominance continues to rise, and by early 2026, the market enters a slow bleed, the beginning of a cyclical bear market. In both scenarios, Cowen insists on one principle: protect downside first. For him, that means holding Bitcoin but exiting most altcoins. If a bear market emerges, Bitcoin historically recovers first, often months or even a full year before other assets.